All right. Hello, everyone. This is going to be the first in our series of pre-recorded video lectures. The reason we've largely changed things up is because a lot of the information, if presented visually, might make it a little more clear to you. Also, because it's pre-recorded, if there's something you are unclear about, it's much easier to go back and watch everything again. One of the negative aspects of these pre-recorded videos is that it's difficult to ask questions if you're unclear about something. So, if in a situation where you are unclear about something, I'd invite you to post questions in our Cacao group chat, because that way any questions I answer, you'll be able to, or maybe somebody else has the same problem, maybe other people are confused about the same aspect of the lecture. So please post your questions in our group chat and I'll do my best to answer them as promptly as possible. Try to post them after the initial class session. So if it's a 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. class, please post your questions after 10 a.m. so that everyone has had the chance to watch the video, and hopefully everyone, if they're unclear, is able to then look at the questions posted in our group chat for clarification and hopefully able to become a little more clear with the topic at hand. Today is the beginning of our discussion concerning lean systems. Lean systems are or is an organizational or management philosophy that is based around looking for efficiency at all times, to examine the operations of a business and to consider how to make all aspects of that business more effective, more efficient, and more streamlined. Not every company focuses on efficiency, but quite a few of them do. Specifically, first and foremost, lean systems focus on eliminating waste. If you cannot see the board very clearly right now, don't worry about it, because following the lecture, I will take photos of it and I will upload it to our group chat. Now, when I say eliminating waste, specifically what I'm talking about is how can we decrease any wasted effort in our firm's operations. Maybe waste occurs because products are sitting in inventory too long. Maybe waste occurs because of overproduction. Maybe waste occurs because we have unclear processes. And we'll discuss the types of waste later, but our primary focus with lean systems is eliminating waste. Also, we also want to focus on minimizing delays. Now, in respect to minimizing delays, what we want to do is we want to be in a situation where the flow of our products is proceeding smoothly. What I mean there is We want, from the beginning of the process until the end, we want as little delay as possible between the various steps of the operation. We want our product to move from point A to point B, point C, etc., as smoothly as possible. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to consider a case study. We're going to look at the company Aldi. Aldi is a British grocery store chain. They're a company that operates in the UK, and their primary focus is at all times on lean systems. They want, throughout the entire customer experience, they want to be as efficient as possible. They want to focus at all times on reducing delays, getting customers in, getting customers out, spending as little money as possible, and moving smoothly through the entire process. Okay, they have several core values. Now, they have several core values, as I've highlighted here. The first, or the primary reason why core values is important with what we're discussing is because it's core values that dictate what we focus on. It's core values that allow us to streamline operations to the utmost of our ability. If something is focused on one of our core values, it's something we need to become efficient at. If it's something that isn't focused on our core values, it's something that we can maybe eliminate, or at the minimum, decrease as much as we are capable of decreasing it. So the first core value that Aldi focuses is simplicity. And what that means is, one of their guiding ideas is that they want to be as simple as possible. Aldi is a no frills operation. They decorate as little as possible. They want to keep everything very, very easy to replicate. Which brings us to our second one, consistency. They're focused on being consistent. And what that means is that all the time they want to be the same. They want every store to be the same. They want all of the interiors to be the same. And they at all times want everything to be easily replicatable. It doesn't matter if you're in a store in London or if you're a store in Manchester. The idea guiding them is that each of those stores will be the same. And finally, their final one is corporate responsibility. When I say corporate responsibility, what I'm directly discussing is that they expect people that work for them and people that work with them to be at their utmost capable at all times. If you work there, they pay some of the highest wages in the industry. They pay very, very well, but they expect a lot. Also, as a supplier, if you want to work with Aldi, you have a responsibility to be almost perfect. If you want to be one of their suppliers, you meet their schedules, you work with them, and you have to be able to, at all times, meet their demands. That's part of their philosophy guiding them, corporate responsibility. So let's look at how we guide these ideas on a day-to-day basis, because these are core values. But how are these core values reflected in actual day-to-day practices? Let's look at that right now. The first one is multitasking. All staff members at Aldi are expected to be equally capable at any number of given jobs. They don't hire cashiers. They don't hire stock people. Instead, what they do is they hire employees and they cross-train them throughout the store. What this does is it increases flexibility, this policy of multitasking at all times. Number one, it increases flexibility. Everybody can do any job whenever needed. However, the negative aspect of that is it does increase staff costs. The second thing that they expect, or the second practical application of their core values, is in perfect expectations. Aldi at all times expects their staff to be perfect. Now, it's a guiding philosophy, but what it does is it generally minimizes mistakes. As I mentioned earlier, Aldi is one of the highest paying jobs in the industry. They pay better than everybody else. However, they do expect perfection. Because one of their core values is corporate responsibility, they don't mind spending if you deliver. They don't mind paying higher wages, but they do expect their staff to be perfect when working. The third direct way in which their core values influence day-to-day operations is in efficient design. as I mentioned earlier, one of their core values guiding their operations is essentially simplicity. They want their operations to be almost exactly the same at all times. They don't want variation. They don't want deviation. They want to be replicatable, and they want to be as simple as possible. What this means is in every store that they open, they always have multiple checkout locations. At peak times, at bottleneck times, they want to be able to process customers as quickly as possible. Because everybody's cross-trained, if things become overly busy, any member of the staff can easily step behind a cash machine or a POS system and process customers through the store. At less busy times, because employees are cross-trained, they're able to leave the cash and move into a stock fulfillment or stocking situation. Also, they have generally smaller locations. They're not a massive operation like an E-Mart or a Costco. They want smaller, easier to move around locations because that increases efficiency. With this efficient design, all of their operations are easily replicatable wherever they want to open a location. So having multiple locations becomes much easier to deal with because each location is essentially similar to another. Continuing on, they always focus on just-in-time delivery. Okay? Because they're an operation that focuses on just-in-time delivery, and because they have smaller locations, they don't have a lot of space to store products. They cannot order a massive amount of goods because they do not have places to keep that. They have small locations. Now what that means is they have to focus on just-in-time delivery. A just-in-time delivery system is a system where when an order is placed, it's expected to be fulfilled almost immediately. When they place an order, they cannot experience delays. And this goes to A, simplicity, but B, corporate responsibility. If they're working closely with suppliers, and their suppliers are consistently reliable, they don't need to store things in store because they can order when products are demanded. This is not always possible, but because of their corporate responsibility value system, they expect this, and it's one way in which they build their entire system together. Next, Again, with simplicity, all of their displays are never dynamic. They do not want things to be changing. They do not want things to be reflected in a way that, for whatever reason, is inconsistent. They want ready-made displays that can be very easily moved in and out. They want all of their products to be pre-ready for sale. When it leaves the stockroom and moves onto the floor, it has to be ready immediately for sale. They want simplicity, they want consistency, and they expect their suppliers to do this for them. So we have a situation where their displays or their pallets make goods ready for sale immediately. There is no waste. They don't need a display section. They don't need someone stocking the shelves before something can be sold. Instead, when it's necessary, it's placed onto the floor in a way in which it's immediately ready for sale. This leads to decreased labor costs. After that, in number 6, we're looking at reduced store hours. Many major grocery chains in the last maybe decade, maybe several decades, have moved to extended shopping hours. They want to be as convenient as possible, maybe 24 hours, maybe till midnight, maybe later. However, Aldi doesn't have, or they're not entirely focused on that aspect of customer service. Instead, what they're focused on is consistent hours at every single location, always the same hours, but they're also hours in which 90% of their business occurs. If you open all night, you are exceedingly convenient. However, many of those hours are wasted hours. They're not generating a lot of sales because Aldi wants consistency and simplicity. They've chosen to operate every single location at the exact same store hours. It's 8 a.m. Their hours range from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. at every single location they operate. If you want to shop at Aldi, there's never any doubt about when they're open. The reason they did this is because through market research, they found that every single location sold 90% of goods in those hours. So for them to operate outside of those hours wasn't a very efficient system. It wasn't very lean. And also what this has done, again, when we're discussing lean systems, is it reduced staffing costs because they know what schedules are busy, they know when they can bring people in and when not, and it allows them to cut costs. All right, everyone, I'm going to take a short break and I'll be back momentarily. All right, welcome back, everyone. I just needed a quick break to gather my notes. Let's continue discussing Aldi because they have a couple more things that they largely focus on to be a lean company. The last one that they do in store and this is surprisingly inconvenient, but I'll explain why it works in a minute, is they have very limited use of credit cards. Now, because they do a lot less, or they accept fewer credit cards, one thing that does happen is they have fewer fees. You may not be aware, but anytime you use a credit card, the credit card company takes a share of the money being given to the store. So by accepting less credit cards, it's simpler for them. They pay less fees to credit card companies. Also, when you use a credit card, the basic idea is that it doesn't process immediately. Every company processes at different times. If it's an international card, it could be a significant amount of time. Because they refuse to accept a lot of credit cards, they have very limited usage of that. What they are able to do is they're able to be in a situation where they have very little processing time. If money comes into the store, very quickly money is processed and it goes into the company's account. Now, however, it is very inconvenient for many people. But what Aldi has found is that their customers aren't particularly inconvenienced by this. Because they're so lean. All of the stores are the same, they're small, the shopping is easy. They've found that their customers want the simplest shopping experience possible. You walk in, you walk exactly to the section that you want, you select your goods, you walk to the cash. There's very little wait time at the cash because they have flexible staff in multiple checkout locations. And you're out of the store after paying cash very quickly from the moment you arrived in the store. In that situation, we see that essentially they're focused 100% on getting customers in quickly, getting them the goods they want, and getting them out quickly as efficiently as possible. This is a great example of a lean system operation. This is a system where there is no waste. There's no wasted time, there's no wasted energy, there's no wasted inventory. Instead, they come in, they get what they want, and they leave as easy and as quickly as possible. So, we failed to discuss one small aspect of Aldi. This is all of their policies that they follow in store. They multitask, they have perfect expectations, they use efficient design, they focus on just-in-time delivery, they have universal hours from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m., and they have limited use of credit cards. However, I said earlier that they also expect corporate responsibility for them involves having efficient suppliers. And so they also focus on the supply chain. Number one, their focus on the supply chain is that 60% of fruits and vegetables 60% of the goods that they purchase for sale are sourced locally. What that does, because they're buying regional fruit and regional vegetables, they have far more efficient delivery systems. If they were buying from all over, if they were buying 100% of their goods from outside the local area, delivery times are longer, delivery is less efficient, and they would need increased inventory to account for that. Because they do 60% of fruit and vegetables locally, what happens is they have far greater reliability with their delivery systems. And that means they can order lower inventory, lower lot sizes. Also, the maximum order, the maximum they ever purchase is 1 month of goods. The reason is because if they purchase more than 1 month, number one, they need somewhere to store all those extra goods, which is, again, less efficient. But also it leads to less waste. If they're purchasing 6 months of goods, some of those goods may spoil. If they're purchasing only 1 month, there's a far smaller chance that anything will rot, that anything will go bad, that anything in any situation could potentially hurt them. Now, this is quite simply one organization, one firm that focuses on lean systems. To recap, lean systems focused on eliminating waste and focused on minimizing delays. If they're doing that, that is their competitive advantage. This is Aldi's competitive advantage. What they're doing here is they're ensuring that they're more likely to be able to compete strongly with other firms, because in all aspects of their business, they might not be the most luxurious store. They may not be the most convenient store, because as we discussed, they only open from 8 a.m. and they only close at 8 p.m. They also have limited use of credit cards. But their competitive advantage is it's a very easy place to shop. It's also relatively cheap goods because they're so lean and so efficient in all aspects of their business. This is just one example of a company that's chosen not to focus on luxury, not to focus on branding, but they create value by being cheap. They are cheap because they're so lean. They also create value by being convenient. They're so convenient because they're a very simple simple shopping experience. You come in, you choose your goods, you process quickly through the register, and you're back in your car, you're back outside the store, you're back on public transportation very, very quickly. This is one example. And at the end of today's class, today's 1 hour lecture, today's 1 hour lecture, I'm going to challenge you to name other companies that also might focus on lean systems. So please be aware of that and maybe begin thinking about it now. So what we've done is we've covered Aldi as a case study. But now, let's look at waste. Because waste is a crippling problem to many, many companies in many different industries. what we're going to do now is when we discuss waste, we're going to look at the different ways that waste can occur in various industries. And for each of them, we're also going to look at why that might negatively, of how that can negatively affect a company. Excuse me. The first type of waste that we can experience, is overproduction. Overproduction is when we produce at too great an amount for what our sales indicate we should be producing at. This is a situation where we're producing, but we're producing too much. If I expect sales of 100 units and I produce 500 units, that would be an example of overproduction. And that's wasteful for two different reasons. Number one, we can, if we're overproducing, we have excess inventory. So I expect my consumers to order 100 units of a good. If I produce 500 units of a good, I have 400 extra. That excess inventory must be stored somewhere. That storage cost that is wasting money for our organization. Those storage costs result in a situation where we're paying too much money for something that we don't really need to pay for if we're producing at an appropriate level. Overproduction also leads to waste in another respect. If we're overproducing, it is more difficult to find defective products. If I produce 100 goods, it's much easier, well, in two ways. Number one, if I produce 100 goods, it's much easier to check 100 goods. It's much easier to check each good and to determine, has a problem, have we stumbled upon a problem? Has a problem occurred? If a problem occurs, as we discussed earlier in terms of managing quality, if we have internal failures or worse, external failures, this is damaging to our company. So in a quality control situation, if we're managing quality effectively, we should be checking our goods to make sure they're being produced effectively. If we're doing limited lot sizes, if we're producing at an effective level, it's much easier to check that amount of goods than if we're producing at an excessive level. On top of that, to continue, we also have a situation where maybe we're not checking goods as they're produced, we're checking entire production lot sizes. So if I produce 1,000 units before I check to see if mistakes are made, and I realize a mistake has been made, I've wasted 1,000 units. If I check 100 units, then if a mistake has been made, I'm only really wasting 100 units, which for my company, for my firm, is a much more cost-effective situation. This is one way, because mistakes sometimes do happen. And if we're overproducing in that situation, we need to determine defective goods, and defective goods are harder the more we produce. If we produce exactly what's ordered, it's a much easier situation for us. Number two, Our second type of waste is what's known as inappropriate processing. Now, this is something that doesn't always immediately make sense to us. But following a lean system approach, it is critically important that we are aware of what inappropriate processing means. Inappropriate processing is when we use techniques to process, to make, to deliver, to manufacture, etc., that are more complicated than they need to be. An example would be, if I'm making only drip coffee. I have a coffee shop that makes drip coffee only. In that scenario, if I purchase an expensive espresso machine, is that an effective use of my resources? Absolutely not. I don't need that. That's inappropriate processing. I don't need something that expensive, something that fancy. Instead, I should purchase something that allows me to make my product in the easiest, most simplistic way possible. Inappropriate processing results in wasted resources because we're purchasing goods that we don't need to purchase. We want to use goods to manufacture our product that are the simplest, oldest, and cheapest tools possible. What I mean by that is if we can use a basic coffee pot to produce drip coffee, that's much simpler than an espresso machine. That's the right call. We also want the oldest. If we recall, we want to invest money in the company when absolutely necessary. If I have some sort of machine that can do the same job as a brand new machine, do it just as effectively, the older, cheaper product is the absolute right call in this situation. It's a scenario where we want to focus on only spending money when necessary. If we cannot use an older machine, that's okay. Invest money. But if an older machine, a well cared for machine, can do the job equally as well as something newer and more expensive, use the older until you can't. Finally, cheapest. If there are two coffee pots, one is $100, one is $10, and the level of quality isn't significantly different. Maybe one is more fashionable, maybe one is a better brand name, but they're both equally reliable. They're both useful in a situation to manufacture the same product that we're ultimately manufacturing. It's a very easy choice. We want to use the cheapest tool possible. All right. That's it for today's lesson. What we're going to do now is when we continue with the next lesson, I'm going to continue talking about waste and we'll go from there. Thank you everybody for listening and enjoy the day.